Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so kindly for joining us. I'm Car Johnson, I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple. Welcome to tonight I hope you're not done clapping, because tonight I am very happy to welcome Brittany Newell to celebrate her novel Softcore. Brittany is joined tonight by perennial Green Apple favorite Rita Bullwinkel. Let's get a hand for Rita as well. So I don't ordinarily embellish my introductions, but I have a lot of feelings about this book, so I'm going to embellish just a little bit. I will say that I love this novel. It was delightfully disorienting. It was sensuous and intoxicating, like a good perfume, maybe. You really can't beat that the novel is set in San Francisco, and I've really been looking forward to having you both a conversation, and I'm glad to be here with all of you. So thank you for joining us and bearing this like terrible weather for San Francisco. So thank you for doing that and showing up for good books. Thank you for joining us both in person here and online. Hello, online audience. I'm waving to a camera if you cannot see. We are broadcasting from San Francisco, as I said. We open each of our events with a land acknowledgement. We are operating on unceded or Métis Ohlone land, and we think that acknowledgement requires action, and so we encourage you to donate either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. 2024 was a good land back year. 2025, you've seen how it started. So if nothing else, perhaps it can be a good land back year. We have details about the Métis Ohlone Land Trust at the back desk if you're interested in how to participate in this project of rematriation. It's back there. I have very brief business before I let these two take over. Now is a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. Photo taking is okay. We got the go-ahead for that. Just don't take like a call here in the middle of the room. That would be super embarrassing for you. Please do check out our full event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us, including the event you are currently attending. We have copies of books by both of our authors at the front register. You can find them there. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you support the authors who put so much work into making these books, then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. And tonight, I'm very excited. Okay, not only do we have books, we also have Softcore merch. We have panties here. So Rel Robinson is here in the house who made these special undies. They're available for purchase. You can pay Rel directly. I'm very glad. This is very compelling merch. I think it's worthwhile for this evening to just get the whole package. Get the book, get a panties. Like, you kind of have to do it. You're not obligated, I suppose, but like this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So think about it. And Rel, thank you so much for joining us. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the authors who are joining us tonight. First, Rita Bullwinkel is the author of the short story collection Belly Up, which won a 2022 Whiting Award. She's the editor of McSweeney's, the deputy editor of The Believer, a contributing editor for Noon, and an assistant professor of English at the University of San Francisco, where she teaches courses in creative writing, zines, and the uses of invented and foreign languages as tools for world building. Her debut novel, Headshot, was longlisted for the Booker Prize in 2024. No big deal. Longlisted for the Booker Prize in 2024. It also happens to be outstanding. Let's give one more hand for Rita Bullwinkel. Your paperback is coming out soon, right?
I think so.
Yeah, right on, man. Okay. Yeah, her paperback's coming out soon. Last but most certainly not least, Brittany Newell is a writer and performer whose work has been published in Granta, the New York Times, Joyland, and Playgirl, among other publications. She published her debut novel, Ula, at the age of 21. She lives in San Francisco, where she works as a professional dominatrix. And her latest novel, Softcore, is the reason we are here tonight. Let's give one more hand for Brittany Newell.
So, hi. Oh my gosh, I am so excited to be here and to get to talk with you, Brittany, about this brilliant, amazing novel.
Thank you.
Do you want to start off our conversation by bringing a little bit of it out into the air? Do you want to read from the book?
Yeah. I'll
Okay,
do
great.
a little reading. Is this like a good... You can hear me. Okay, gorgeous. Okay, so as you probably know, the book is about Ruth, who at the start of the book, we meet her. She's working as a stripper, living with her ex-boyfriend. And the passage that I'm going to read from is right after her ex-boyfriend disappears and a new girl shows up at the club. The Friday after Dino's disappearance, Emmeline showed up at the club. I can't forget the night I first saw her. I was doing the rounds, trying not to cross my arms. When the strip club was less than full, you felt the brutal force of the AC. I did my best to keep my body language open, friendly, but I was shivering in my mini dress. I wore day-glow mesh with my favorite shoes, 6-inch pleasers with a plastic goldfish in the platform. Dino had picked them out when I first started dancing. So camp, he'd exclaimed. How exquisitely stupid. He told me they could be my trademark, as if irony and flair were what drew men to me, rather than my cheerful passivity and tween hips. Wearing them made me feel closer to him. I was scanning the room when Emmeline walked on stage. What I noticed immediately was her long blonde hair. It had the sheen of buttered toast. She stood with one hand on the pole, one hip cocked. Her eyes were blank, lips loose. She didn't do any pole tricks, barely looked at the crowd. She didn't act flirty or sultry or brash, nor did she act timid, the knock-kneed Bambi shtick. She moved as if she were alone, undressing in her bedroom. Her underwear was simple, a white satin bra with matching thong, a thin gold necklace with the letter E. For the entirety of my life, I've been jealous of girls with thin gold necklaces. They always seem to have it all, a beauty that invites and never frightens. I stood there watching her, rapt as a client. There was a touch of teenaged arrogance to her gestures, the belief that death did not apply, mixed with an almost genteel grace. I could picture her crossing the floor with a book on her head. I could picture her flashing the gardener just for fun. She was soft-spoken, churlish, sleepy, raw, like the sticker I'd put on my childhood notebook, 90% angel. She swung her hips in lazy circles, eyes fixed on the floor. Her cafe latte-colored nipples faced in opposite directions, a trait I'd always found sexy. Her belly ring twinkled in the stage lights. From time to time, she toyed with it. From where I stood on the stage, I could see the silvery stretch marks on her ass cheeks and thighs. Somehow they looked sexy too, hickeys left by aliens. She was so thoroughly, overwhelmingly girlish that it almost hurt to behold her. The men, of course, ate it up. This wasn't theater, it was realism. Our clients wanted what they couldn't have. A girl alone, unmarked by men. A girl freed from their need and persuasion, their projections of who she should be. Like smoke, their longing made our hair smell funny. Perhaps that's why they loved the girl-on-girl shows. They wanted pussy in its purest form, a slick pink infinity sign. It was something they constantly whined about. I want someone genuine, they'd cry, knocking over their beer. No bullshit. Are you the real deal? Oh yes, we lied, making our ponytails bob. But of course. I guess I'll stop there.
Oh my gosh, I love that section so much. And okay, perfectly leads into my first question, which is that so much of this book, I think for me, was about projection. I mean, the section that you read from is obviously like Ruth's really intense projections on Emmeline, and I feel like in the novel, I was always switching as a reader between these registers of understanding like what was being projected on Ruth and what Ruth was projecting on those around her. And I was curious if that kind of like projective direction was something you were thinking about while writing, and what you think the relationship is between projection and Ruth in the book.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it makes me think of something that in the final round of editing when I was working with my agent and her assistant, Mary Alice, they recommended that I look into like Gothic literature. And I was like, fuck, I don't know what the fuck that is.
I cannot name a single work.
I was like, Rebecca, question mark? I don't know. But, so I did a little tiny bit of research. And it was actually like immensely helpful as this framework to sort of bring everything together. And my layman's understanding of Gothic literature is that there's always a haunting, and that it's fundamentally concerned with ghosts, but moreover with hauntings. And there's usually a haunted house, and people who are, followed around by unfinished business or, what have you, whatever shape the ghosts take. And I thought that was such a like perfect like container for thinking about sex work as a series of hauntings, and like romance as a series of hauntings. And when you say projection, 100% there's so much projection, but in the relationship between Ruth and Emmeline, who's like the new like perfect hot clean girl at the club, who she like projects all the things that she feels she was deprived of onto this girl. But when I think of like the role of projection in the book, I mainly think about the relationship, like the primary romance between Ruth and Dino. And it's not like a spoiler or a secret that like pretty early in the book, like Dino disappears, and then from there until the end of the book, she's haunted by all of these doppelgangers or these versions of Dino that from reader to reader I think will differ, like which ones seem to be real and like embodied and fleshly, and which ones seem to be projections. And I mean maybe this is like, I hope this doesn't seem like a terribly pessimistic view of love, but I think projection is a large part of it. And absolutely. Like you see that with Ruth, at least as a character, like she can't separate the fantasies and the memories that she's projecting onto not just Dino, but all the men in her life, which she encounters sort of like as she goes along on this like wild goose chase for a Dino that might not even exist anymore if he is at this point a projection.
Yeah. In that way, I feel like Softcore is really in conversation with something like Rachel Cusk's Outline.
Never read it. Find her a bit dry. Cancel me. I find her hard to get into, sorry.
Oh God.
Everybody leaves.
And having the interviews recorded, I will say,
my career is over.
Stop.
This is like straight to YouTube.
She probably doesn't use YouTube.
She probably doesn't. Yeah, she probably has
no internet connection.
And like a really beautiful, tasteful English cut.
Yeah, that's why she doesn't have internet. Yeah.
Something one of the things I admire about Outline is that you have this character at the center of Outline where people are just talking at her, and the protagonist is just like a screen for all the other characters to project a shape upon her. And I feel like Ruth functions so much the same way, but in many ways like a more dynamic way, because she's alternating. Like in some sections she's like she is being molded by the people around her, and in others she is molding others. Oh my gosh, Brittany, there's so much about this book that I love, and I hope this isn't too just like rudimentary question, but I'm so curious to know how it began for you.
Oh yeah, that's not rudimentary at all. And I will say, I totally agree with this idea of Ruth as like a shapeshifter, which is something that speaks to like her as like a sex worker, but also like her in love and like kind of like her difficulties like maintaining that. Like I feel like she has very porous boundaries. As a character, but how it began is it started as like a short story. So like the whole
that is shocking to me.
Really? Oh, yes. Interesting. Yeah, like the whole first chapter was a short story that just in my mind was like bounded, and then
I am shook. Usually I feel like like short stories that turn into novels, you can like
You can
feel,
tell.
you can like feel the ghost of the short story. No,
Wow.
yeah, not there at all. Wow, love
I think because, I mean, I'm not, whatever, I guess, I mean, you would know this as, like, a literal professor, like, don't they say that,
that.
like,
It means nothing.
no, but, like, don't they say that, like, short stories are, like, the hardest, they're, like, the pinnacle of, like, the writing format?
Some people say that.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, maybe Rachel Cusk says that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I gotta let her go. She's probably really nice and a great writer, and we love her and go buy her books or whatever.
Yeah.
But, like, so I guess, honestly, for me, like, I feel like it's easier for me to write novels than short stories, maybe because I just, like, don't know when to shut the fuck up. So, like, it was a short story that was published in N+1, and then my friend Emily was asking me all these questions specifically about Dino and Ruth's romance. Like, how did they meet? Why do they still live together if they're broken up? And just sort of, like, igniting my own curiosity about the characters.
Yeah.
And, like, maybe this is, like, such a, like, cheesy thing to say, but, like, wondering that, like, kind of made me curious about the characters as well, and, like, made me want to, like, explore that or, like, follow the, like, thread of that curiosity. So, and actually her sort of really fixating on this idea of their romance, I think is what, like, activated the beginning of writing the whole book as a love story, which is what we were talking about. Like, it is, like, fundamentally a love story for Valentine's Day in perfect time if you want to get it for your lovers or whatever.
Which, totally, okay, leads into my next question, which is, do you think of it as a love story?
Yeah, definitely.
I love that. Okay, I mean, one thing that was really large for me in the book was, I cannot remember the last time or any time I fell for a character as hard as I fell as the reader for Dino.
Oh, well, we have our proclivities, don't we?
Dino is, like, extremely cool and sexy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I literally cannot think of another literary fiction book where I have had that thought. I mean, am I reading the long
someone
long
on
book?
Goodreads said, this book is absolutely fucking disgusting. If I hear one more description of the main character's boyfriend's stomach, I will throw this book out a window.
Yeah, oh my gosh, those were
But we love the haters.
Those sections were so sensual. Also, like, the long, beautiful descriptions of his nose.
Yeah.
His honker.
His holy honker, I believe I say.
Yeah, and I felt like there was even, like, there was this point in the novel, in my memory reading it, it was like 3/4 of the way through, where Ruth kind of directly addressed the reader in some way and was like, just so you know, he wasn't an angel.
Yeah.
He had his controlling aspects. Mm-hmm. And I felt that really anticipated the fact that I was, like, idealizing him in my mind in some way. Because she's projecting so much on his absence. His food, how amazing he is his cooking.
Yeah.
His, like, amazing pack of dogs, which are kind of like his ghostly afterlife. Yeah. I mean, so wait, this is not, I mean, do you feel like people are, I'm curious to know, do you think it's a love story? You aren't encountering readers who are just like, I pledge my heart only to Dino and Dino forever?
I remember someone saying, when I was shopping the book around, Bill Clegg, who's, like, an agent, who kindly rejected my book, but I remember he said, like, oh, like, I've never heard so many different descriptions for, like, for the ways that men can smell, like, especially with Dino.
Yeah.
And then from there, I was, like, a little domino effect, and then I feel like lots of people, when they're talking about the book, like, mention, like, the sense of smell and how,
definitely,
like,
so
heightened.
present.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it shouldn't shock me. I mean, so, like, the book is called Softcore, and obviously it's a double entendre, or I guess a triple entendre, obviously with softcore, hardcore, and then the idea of, like, your soft core, like, when you're vulnerable and exposed to someone else and completely, like, I guess, like, open to another person. But also it's the name of a perfume that Ruth wears, that Dino gifted her. A made-up perfume that, I mean, I would love, like, a perfumier to create for me.
That should happen.
Right? Yeah. So I guess I shouldn't be that surprised that, like, smell is so central to it, but I guess it's like that thing where, like, you write something and you're just so in it, and then it gets like refracted back to you like through the reader's experience of it, which is also with like the plot, like we were talking about it earlier, like I guess I have like a sort of like Barth's-esque perspective where I'm like, you know, whatever you think about the book is true. Like, don't ask me, I'm dead. Everyone's dead, the author's dead. You're the only living person left, you know?
This is my next question, which is the end. But before we move on, as you were talking, I was remembering that I mean, Pride and Prejudice is like deeply not a book for me. I had to read it in high school, like most everyone. But I remember encountering people who were like, "Oh, Mr. Darcy." Like I feel
like he's like a dreamboat or something.
Like Dino is, I feel like my Mr. Darcy. Like,
well, that's because we're like San Francisco bitches. Yeah, we would love the like cross-dressing like ketamine dealer, Dr. Darcy, doctor.
Yeah, for me,
maybe the better.
For me, good. Anyway, okay, the end. I am so grateful that you are interested in entertaining questions about the end, because I finished this book and had like an immediate urge to shove it into every person's hand in my life, so I could talk with them about the whole book, but also specifically the ending, which I think I'm interested if you would agree is a pretty fundamentally ambiguous or dual ending.
Yeah, I think it's very open. And the more people I talk to, the more I'm like, oh, there's more interpretations than I even realized.
You know what I kept thinking? Yeah, I was trying to think of like a visual metaphor for my understanding of the ending, and I'm not going to do a hardcore spoiler.
Just a softcore spoiler.
It's right. But it was almost as if the author were setting up like all these different possible presents that were like laid over one another. Yeah. And then you as the reader had to like travel between possible presents for Ruth without the author being super directive about what was like the true or real present. Yeah. What's your relationship to the ending and ambiguity?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that is, as a reader, I find that very exciting.
It's like so exciting.
Yeah, like an ambiguity and an openness, and I always feel kind of like patronized or let down when everything is too like tidy at the end or like too like sewn up. It was like definitely something with like in like working through drafts with like my editors, like that there was a bit of a need for like actually a very good piece of advice I got was, if you want to write something with an open ending, you as the author should have your own personal opinion of what you think happened, and you should write around it, but without spelling it out, and like so that still like leaves room for the possibility. But then for me, I feel like I do have my own interpretation, and like I think there are Easter eggs. I don't think this is a spoiler, but like for my own interpretation of what happened, I feel like an Easter egg is a very short scene that I added really late in the editing process, which is where Ruth is remembering like the last like shower that she and Dino take together. Yeah. And he's saying like, oh, like, isn't this nice? Wouldn't it be so nice to fall in love all over again? And she's just like, yeah, it would be nice. And then he like disappears. And for me, that seems like him sort of expressing or hinting at a motivation for his disappearance. Personally, like, you know, because I think that is an option for, you know, why did he disappear? Like, is it like nefarious forces? Yeah. Is it him sort of like playing mind games? Is it him wanting to give them this like hallowed experience that everybody wants but no one gets, which is the ability to fall in love all over again and like go back to the beginning? And I guess for me, I favor that perspective of this idea that it was like him trying to put into, like, I guess that it was a game, but it was actually like a very like romantic game of being like, if we become strangers to each other again, then we can like try again and do it differently again and be better and fall in love again. But then people have like very different perspectives and there's all these different Dino doppelgangers, and I think it's up to the reader to decide like which one is him, which one is a projection, which one is a ghost. And
yeah, it's so elegant, and the experience of reading it, of like picking your true Dino at the end. I've never encountered a book that has that type of ending. The only other book I can think of that has not that same type of pick your own final character, but the same level of just like heart-wrenching, incredible, captivating ambiguity is probably Trust Exercise by Susan Choi.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you and her, you do ambiguous endings with just the utmost elegance and grace. Okay, speaking of other books, I was so while reading, I was thinking about who I think you're in conversation with. I stand by. I think you're in conversation with Cuss.
I'm leaving her on red.
Yeah. I think you're in conversation with Susan Choi, specifically formally.
Yeah.
I thought a lot about Nobody Is Ever Missing by Catherine Lacey, which is a deeply interior novel.
And she's an FSG author too,
she
right?
is.
Yeah.
You both, I feel like, put me in the mind of being so inside someone as they were walking through the world. I thought about the kind of like propulsive, confessional tone of someone like Barry Hannah, specifically in Ray. I thought a lot about Brontes Burnell, specifically Since I Lay My Burden Down.
Totally.
Who do you think that this book is in conversation with? What other books do you think it's in conversation with?
Well, yeah, I am literally like not that he needs me to be, but I am like a one-woman like Brontes like publicity team, and anytime anyone's like, "What's your favorite book?" or "What book?" like I always say 100 Boyfriends, because it's
so good,
and it's so like genre defying.
Yes.
And I already like knew that I loved FSG, like the publishing house, but when I read that, I was like, oh, like the literary world is very stuffy and conservative, and they don't really like taking risks. And so reading that and their ability to like put that book out so beautifully while still like preserving like it's like what makes it so special, which is that rawness and that sort of manic energy, which is very difficult to capture in a book. Like
totally
made me be like, okay, like I hope FSG like buys this book, because it just like shot them to the top of my list. And I mean, also very obvious answer that I am like a Mary Gateskill fangirl.
Love that. I love that. That's not obvious to me.
Well, I guess.
Tell me more.
Well, she's like, I guess I think of Bad Behavior,
right? And
because they wanted to as like sex worker, sad girl, proto Lana Del Rey, like San Francisco-esque, like moody, like also like I don't think we write similarly, but she does have a very inimitable style that is like so specific and at times very jagged, but at times very inviting.
That is so what it is.
But then at times softens and lets you in when you've already felt kind of on the edge of it. And I guess saying this out loud, I admire writers who manage to like preserve and protect their style, like in the face of a industry that is maybe like more comfortable with things that feel familiar.
Totally.
So yeah, I guess like authors that operate on that level of voice. I guess I'm very like sensitive to voice and protective of my own voice. Like I think I'm easy to work with as like a writer, but when it comes to like my voice, I'm very like protective of it. And I'm like, no, you have to like read the sentence out loud and like like you can't change that word,
God bless.
Yeah, I know we gotta fight for some things.
Special place in
heaven.
In heaven, yeah.
With all the doggies.
For the people try and get in your sentences.
Oh, in hell then.
Hell. I thought you were.
I thought we're going to heaven.
Wherever we're not.
Yeah.
You can put the. Yeah.
I get really mad. Like if an editor like changes a word and it's like the original word was 2 syllables and they change it to a 1 syllable word, I'm like, what the fuck? You didn't even say this out loud 3 times? What's wrong with you?
I know. I will share this because I'm embarrassed, but I once in an editorial pass, like, I like if anyone has also been subjected to, as I'm sure Brittany and I have innumerable times, to the dehumanization of word track changes.
Mm-hmm.
I once really passive aggressively linked to like Gariel Lutz's The Sentences A Lonely Place as like a thing for the copy editor to read, which was like not polite or nice. To be like, no, also you should read this.
I get like defensive around like the music musicality of
I can hear it. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is what gives it such incredible texture and
Thank you.
if you don't have voice, what even do you have? Nothing.
Yeah, we all know I don't have plot, so I gotta have voice. You know what I mean?
Gosh.
I'm all vibes, no plot, and that to me is not a pejorative. Like, I'm like, yeah, duh. Like, that's what I love as a reader. Like,
Deeply.
I mean, there is plot, like, things happen, but I think for me, the pleasure of reading is, like, an atmospheric quality. That reading is not so dissimilar. The pleasures of reading are not so dissimilar from the pleasures of listening to music, for me. Is that, like, full body loss to something that feels atmospheric and bigger than yourself or whatever. And so it's not so much about, like, the events that happen. It's about the way it makes me feel.
Okay, I think I have two more. I have so many more questions. I'm going to try to just keep it to two more questions, and then, wonderful audience, if you have questions percolating, this is your 2 question notification.
Don't ask if it's a memoir, because it's not.
Okay, I feel like this is a question you've been answering a lot, but we are here in San Francisco, and I'm really curious to hear more about your relationship to place in this book. This book is obviously set here. It's set here in the city. And San Francisco is such a large part of this book, and is totally, for me as a reader, was a character within the novel. Mm-hmm. And there was like this really specific and unusual delight and joy to be reading and to be at Baker Beach or be at the Tenderloin and be like, oh yeah, like I know that restaurant. Or there was a Case in the Sunset where I was like, I'm pretty sure.
Happy Family Gourmet.
Yeah. I was like, yeah. I'm pretty like, or almost recognizing something. And yeah, once again, I mean, like, there just are not very many works of literature or art or film set in contemporary San Francisco, really at all. And I think even like I share vulnerably, like with my own writing, it is a place that has assumed like this overly loud and horrible and wrong and just one-dimensional narrative about it.
Oh yeah, especially in contemporary fiction, the conflation of San Francisco with Silicon Valley is like so unchecked. You know, where it's like, okay, on the most basic level, they are literally like 45 minutes away. They are so deeply not the same place. Like not even getting into like, you know, whatever, like the aesthetic and ethical issues. They get so like smushed together.
Yeah. What was it like to write about this place? It really felt to me reading it that it was such a love letter to the city in a way that felt like so wonderful. Yeah, what's your relationship to San Francisco as a character in the book?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love that you say that. I do feel that San Francisco is a character in the book, and that, you know, if we think of this book as like a love story, the driving love story is between Dino and Ruth, but then there's all of these like parallel intimacies that get explored like on the way back to Dino. And, you know, there's the intimacies that are, like, more difficult to name or, like, less clearly legible, like the intimacies with, like, her ex-sugar daddy who comes back into her life and becomes a central figure. And
who at one point I was like, I think I know who this is.
He's definitely, like, an amalgam of different vaguely remembered sugar daddies from my youth or whatever.
Incredible.
And then there's like the relationship she has with the sort of romantic relationship she has with her female friends. And all this is to say, I think a very parallel romance is the one that she has with San Francisco, is this relationship that she has with the city, that she's sort of like tracing at night and going to these different places and how like charged they are and how haunted they are, I guess. And just sort of reimagining haunting is not necessarily a like bad or dark thing, but like to have this like haunted relationship with the city that she lives in is actually just like one that's like full of like connection and memories, and a lot of it is her kind of like memory tripping as she goes through San Francisco. But yeah, I do feel that it is a character, and I do feel so fucking annoyed with the like sort of like pseudo dystopian Silicon Valley as San Francisco like Dickensian view that is like sort of propagated recently in books that I won't name. Where then I, of course, like furiously Google and see that the like author like never lived in San Francisco, and I just get annoyed. It's so one-dimensional and frustrating, especially when San Francisco is such a I mean, it's so many things, obviously, but it's also a city with like a deep like history of like debauchery and like people bottoming out, and historically people like
definitely it's a boom bust town.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just like such a underground here that has always been. And of course that's like one element of the book is like Ruth sort of like journeys into the underground, and you know, I guess I feel that those should be written about in a not in like this lurid like journalistic way, but in a more romantic way or a more sensuous way. Like I guess I tried to make the city feel like tactile and real in that way.
Yeah. The New York Times review of this book was so beautifully written and got so, I feel like for me as a reader, really resonated with so much of my reading. I really, as you may know, it was shocking to me when this was confirmed to me that a lot of writers who write reviews do not write their own review titles.
Oh, yeah.
And the review title was a narrative that descends into the San Francisco underworld of data and drugs.
Data and drugs, I think. Which I was like, of course they had to pick that one line where I mentioned data.
New York Times was
they were like, something about Silicon Valley, like something. Yeah, we talked about that. They were like, that one line.
I was like, there's nothing in this book about data.
And actually, the sentence,
what is this?
The sentence is actually the C6 city of data and drugs.
That's right.
So it's much more beautiful that way. Okay, but she I know. I was like, why? Why this like need to have it be like conflated with that?
I was quite
or
I like audibly scoffed.
Me too. I'm so happy you mentioned that because I thought that was me just being like sensitive. And then
I think that the reviewer did not write that. That's my
I probably not. It was just like the New York Times being like, oh, like this is
the person who like writes their push notifications was just
I will say that I've also seen that with people summarize or whatever publications like summarizing the book and being like, Ruth starts working at a strip club where she seduces like outcasts, crypto bros, and old lovers alike. They have to say the crypto bros.
I know, very, very frustrating. Okay, last question from me, which was I immediately, when I finished this book, after I had the impulse to make everyone I know read it so I could talk about it with them, I was like, oh my god, I can't believe you've written another book. How do I read it? How do I get my hands on it?
Question.
I haven't read it yet. I'm wondering what your relationship is like between the two books. And what your writing practice is like in general. And
I did an interview the other day where someone asked like, what is like the familial relationship between my first book?
Phrasing.
And I was like thinking about it, and I was like, I guess they're like estranged siblings or something.
Ooh, nice.
Like the person that wrote Ula, my first book, feels very distant from the person that wrote Softcore, but like, I mean, I told this story already at the N+1 reading, but me and my high school friend Nevin found this old zine that we had made when we were in high school. And we were like, oh, it's going to be so funny. Let's like flip through it and see the stupid shit we cared about in high school. And then we flipped through it and we're reading our writing and we were like, oh, it's like literally the exact same themes that we're exploring like today. Like it's like, I mean, obviously in much more like juvenile, melodramatic language. But for me, it was like, oh, like still trying to write about longing and desire and embodiment or whatever. And so I guess in that way you can't really like outrun yourself. And so I'm sure like if I were to like force myself to reread Ula, I would think that it would be probably just like sort of like a little bit more grown-up version of like that zine where it's me still trying to like work out those ideas. Oh, and obsession. I feel like I'm always writing about obsession and unreliable narrators. I guess I'm kind of like, oh, is it dangerous to compare the two? Because then I realize that I only have like a handful of ideas. Like, you know what I mean? Like, in a way, this is such a fucked up thing that my brain is connecting to, but you know how when you find out you only have, like, not that I mean, I'm kind of an antinatalist, but you find out that you only have a limited number of eggs. You know what I mean? Like, when you're born, isn't that true? Like, your eggs are all in you when you're born.
I think...
And then I'm like, oh, yes, I only have, like, 7 ideas, and I'm just carrying them around with me.
I think we kind of each get a Rolodex.
I think mine's pretty limited. I think mine's just, like, the same thing I'm rehashing over and over.
No, I feel like there are these, like, touch points that when you go into the, like, whatever less conscious place, when you're making something, whether it's, like, an image or something else, or a larger impulse. I don't know. I relate to that. But estranged siblings, like, that's pretty far. Like, estranged siblings fucking hate each other.
Or, like, don't talk.
Don't talk.
Or,
I mean,
like...
does anyone hate each other more than estranged siblings? Like,
Or maybe it's, like, that thing where, like, you don't realize that you have a sibling, and then you meet them later, and then you, like, fall in love with them.
Well,
because they're so similar.
that's like the opposite.
There's, like, a word for that syndrome where, like, if you were separated at birth from your twin and you don't know their twin, and then you meet them and you're like, oh my god, they're so brilliant and hot. Like, maybe that's what would happen if, like, the narrator of the first book met Ruth. Like, they would probably be like, oh, you're also so obsessive and lonely and hot. I don't know if they'll ever meet. Because I think it's pretty hard to find a copy of my first book, but maybe it's out there somewhere in some used bookstore.
I will find a copy, and I'm excited to read. With that, do we have some audience questions?
I have like young lady in the front row, blushing bride.
I'm curious, just listening to you talk about the voice that's in your book, and knowing also, obviously, that you are a drag performer who lip syncs other people's words all the time, and also has to talk on a mic and gay bars a lot. I guess I'm curious about, like, how talking and lip syncing and writing, like, have any connection for you in terms of, like, using language in different or similar ways.
Well, it makes me think of what we were talking about earlier about, like, projection and ghosts, and then it also makes me think about, like, possession, like, kind of like thinking of drag as a benevolent possession or something, or this, like, 3-minute possession of, like, you know, like this feeling that's, like, so intense that it, like, has to be shared, which I guess is maybe sort of what the experience of writing is like, or getting into that voice. Yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question, sort of?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious about, like, the, like, musicality. Just that a monthly part of your routine is, like, practicing lip syncing songs. And so you're, like, spending time with the words of those songs in a way that maybe...
Well, as you know...
infiltrates your writing at all.
I definitely think it does. And, like, as you know, I think the best poetry is, like, pop music. Is, like, do you believe in life after love? Or something, to me, is like, okay, give her the Pulitzer Prize. Like, or like Lana Del Rey, if this is the end, I want a boyfriend. Literally the most genius piece of writing about longing, in my opinion, that's ever been written. And so I think that sort of incantation quality of, like, memorizing potentially, like, stupid seeming, or it's not stupid, but they're sort of, like, pared down or, like, earnest, like, I think that definitely, like, I mean, it's probably like a chicken and the egg, but I'm sure there's, like, a feedback loop in, like, how that informs, like, my aesthetic, like, the sort of, like, like, that earnestness and the love song quality, if that makes sense. If that answers it more. Anybody else?
Okay, I hope this isn't the same question that Rita asked, because obviously, like you said, San Francisco does play such, like, a huge role in the book. And San Francisco is such, like, a highly visual place. It's, like, not Dallas, like, you're not in your car, you know? And there's, like, peaks and valleys, there's vistas. It's, like, one of the only places you can, like, apprehend, like, the entire city from, like, all these points around it. And as I was reading the book, I was really imagining the city as, like, a mural. You know, like in a taqueria when they have a mural of the city, and it'll have, like, Chinatown, like, like next to the Golden Gate Bridge with the Coit Tower like behind it, and then and there's a buffalo in front, and there's there's water on the wrong side.
And you're like, that's my home.
And I know you said that, you know, obviously we all dislike the narratives around San Francisco that are popular right now, but I'm just curious, like, if you feel like you were writing like your version of San Francisco. Was it like a non-version of San Francisco? And maybe as an addendum to that question, like how the kind of geography, like the physicality of the place as opposed to like the notion of it, like really influenced you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. It reminds me of, again, when I was doing, because, you know, whatever, so much of writing is just like happening in solitude, and you're just like deep in your own thoughts, and you don't even realize what you're doing until you have like an editor looking at it, and an editor was like, oh yeah, this really seems to be in conversation with sort of like 90s sleazy erotic noir films like Basic Instinct, or this idea of like the San Francisco at night, or like the wayward heroine who falls into all these like dark corners of San Francisco. And that was exciting to me aesthetically, but was also deeply not intentional. So I guess like that was more like my own like experiential version of San Francisco that I was writing towards. But then I think there is like a very like specific like geography of San Francisco that I write into it to give it more of that like tactile quality. Like there's like descriptions of her and Dino like walking from, I think I say like they walk from like Grace Cathedral to like China Beach or whatever, and like this attempt to like contain all of San Francisco in all of its moods. I guess that would probably be the best way to describe it, is like I feel like I wanted to write towards like the moods of San Francisco as they strike me. And because it's a book about not just because it's a book about sex work, but because it's a book about like loss and loneliness and desire, so much of it happens at night. So I think it is a very like nocturnal vision of San Francisco, and also like a lover's version of San Francisco. Like there's a lot about like the places where Ruth has these very like romantic memories of things that happen there in San Francisco, which probably come from like my own like loving wink bank of San Francisco.
Maybe one more question.
I have a question.
Love the front row.
Strangers.
This is an easy one, but just like you mentioned that Gothic literature, you had to read Gothic literature to...
Yeah, I didn't read Gothic literature. I read about Gothic literature.
Okay. So you weren't like, Dracula is what helped write this.
No, I mean,
is that Gothic? I don't even know what Gothic literature is. Is Dracula Gothic? I trust you completely.
So,
yeah, let's ask Lily Rose Depp. Maybe she knows. But I am like reading about like vampires for my next book. I'm interested in that. Wait, but I don't want to step on your question.
I just wanted to know like what Gothic literature you like have found and enjoyed, and
it was more just like what is like the nature of Gothic literature. And I think what's interesting to me was like I had already written like a big part of the book is that like Ruth is in Dino's house after he goes away, and so like that house then sort of by proxy becomes a haunted house. And then when I was reading about Gothic literature, they mentioned how much like haunted houses are like such a like staple of the genre, and sort of like, and I guess Dracula is that with like the big castle or whatever. And I mean now sort of again like working through the same 7 ideas that I'm like always like batting around in my head. Like I guess the third book is more just kind of like extending like a different is sort of like trying to feel out like a different idea of haunting, which centers more around like appetite and like hunger and consumption, whereas like I feel like this book is a bit like softer and more about desire in that way. But yeah, I guess that's not a spoiler, but just a little taste of what I'm interested in now, which is a lot about vampires.
If you haven't already, you should absolutely buy Softcore. This book is such an incredible feat of emotional intelligence and beautiful sensory feeling. I just love it so much. Congratulations, Brittany.
Thank you. On this blustery night. And make sure you get Headshot by Rita. Oh, and get Rel's underwear.
Yes.
It's still for sale in the back. The Softcore panties.
Sure, I'll do it. Can we give one more hand for Brittany Newell? I've been so looking forward to this and you did not disappoint. Thank you so much. This was highly entertaining. I love this book. I love this. I love you two as a pair in conversation. I love these underwear if I haven't like made that perfectly clear. But I will be brief. And as they said, books are available at the front register. You can find them there. Brittany, I'm going to have you signing books at the back where my colleague Grace, where those bear balloons are.
Oh,
is perfect. And also where my colleague Grace is. And you can buy some undies from Rel directly if you are interested. Take a look around. Make yourselves comfortable. If you have any questions, let me know. And if not, we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.